So we're going to go through it. If you guys missed, I'll just start with this tidbit, actually, 30-second tidbit. If you guys happen to miss Workshop Wednesday yesterday, we did this cool thing. And actually, let me go back to the beginning of my slides because I was halfway through the slideshow. But we did this thing on Workshop Wednesday yesterday. Our CEO and founder, Jason Lincoln, talked about, the things that always work in marketing. So if you missed that one, the recording is on our YouTube page. But one of the things he mentioned was webinars like this one. So I think it's a little funny that it's meta that we kind of do it too. So we do them as well. We have different topics for them. But again, if there's something you guys want to see in a future one, let us know. We decided, because it was a good refresher for all of us too internally at SaaStr, one of the things Jason shouted about yesterday was like doing a product roadmap or even just a demo on your calls, answering any questions. And so we thought it'd be fun to do a sort of light SaaStr version of a roadmap, if you will, just because, we do events. And so that is pretty much the roadmap. But, there's different like activations and features and all these things going on at our different events. So we thought we'd share a little bit more of them with you today, if that sounds good. And again, we'll try and keep these brief. I know last week's was like really long because we had a lot of really good event stuff to go through. So we'll try and make this one hopefully in 20 minutes or less, so to give you all the info. So, okay, on our roadmap, we've got 3 major events in person and 1 major digital event this year. APAC, which wrapped up about 2 months ago now, and Singapore was our first event. It's funny that the slide said 700 and we actually had over 1,000. Our next one coming up fast is SaaStr Europa, which we'll chat about. And then, to kind of round out the back half of the year, SaaStr Annual, which you guys all know is our biggest and largest event back in the Bay Area, back at the San Mateo County Event Center. For those who are maybe newer sponsors, it's 40 acres. We take over and build out the entire thing. So it's kind of unlike anything else that you might have been a sponsor of or even attended previously. And then we always end our year with SaaStr Scale. We do like a live, really huge, like digital mega event. And I know people think digital events are dead, but if there's any proof from SaaStr's Workshop Wednesdays, like gaining momentum every Wednesday and having more and more people, I don't think they're quite dead yet. If you do them right and put in, we bring in experts, we do different topics, very topical things. So that's kind of our roadmap of events. Anything you want to add, Voya?
No, the only thing I'll add is we're tracking pretty well in terms of attendance for both London as well as annual. We compare year over year to where we are last year at this time.
Yep.
London's going really well. Like initially, I think our forecast was 3,000. I wouldn't be surprised if we get somewhere between 4 and 5 easily. And annual, as of now, we're tracking well to get 12,500 attendees too as well. So the good news for you is hopefully you get to meet more people if you're one of our sponsors than you did last year or previously at SaaStr.
Yeah, totally. 100% agreed. We'll chat about Europa and all the learnings there. A lot has changed in our media, so I wanted to just take 5 minutes to chat about this. And for those of you who've been here every week, we'll try and add some new color and flavor to this. So the podcast, this is, again, one of the things I can't, this, again, I'm a little biased, but I do think the session was really good yesterday. It was actually our most popular Workshop Wednesday. But one of the things that was also chatted about, again, if you missed it on the YouTube, but one of the things that was chatted about is things that always work in marketing. Podcast is one of them, right? So SaaStr has its own podcast. And I'll just add some color here on like roadmap, things we're thinking about in the podcast, because many of you I know have seen this. Again, just to add some color here of our podcast. So in the last 2 or 3 months since the beginning of the year, we've actually done things a little bit slightly differently on the SaaStr podcast. So the SaaStr podcast everyone knows and loves for a long time has been, it actually started out as original interviews with Harry Stebbings, who now has his own podcast and firm. It's 20 VC. So actually, if you go back and listen to the old ones, you're like, who's host? It's Harry Stebbings. Original SaaStr podcast host, and actually coming to SaaStr Europa, so fun. But yeah, so we used to do like original interviews, and then Jason used to do a lot of early interviews back in the day, just kind of like launch it, seed it, get it going. And then what we've discovered is like slowly but surely, and that was when we did 1 episode a week. And then slowly but surely we started to add, 2 episodes a week. Then we went to 3. If you guys have noticed, we've actually gone back to 2. So that might be something that I don't think we've chatted about a lot. And again, we're trying to use this as like a roadmap kind of color commentary sort of webinar. So if it's helpful for learnings, like we did 3 religiously all of last year. We were like 3 podcasts without fail, and like kind of burnt ourselves out a little getting 3 podcasts out a week. And what we found out was it was too many podcasts per week. Like it actually didn't help our downloads. Like I think they went slightly dipped because there were too many podcasts. And so we were like a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of content that we were producing. I get it. It's a lot. So then we went back down to 2, right? But we looked at the data for the whole year and we're like, all right, for 2023, we're going to go back down to 2. And that has seemed to gotten us back, back in the right track, back on our distribution, back on the kind of downloads that we usually get around, 240,000 or more per month. And so that's been really interesting to see on the podcast. We've also done something differently of like, now you guys will notice like the podcast episodes and content themselves are a little bit different this year as well. Like we've gone back to 2. They come out Wednesday, Friday, which has worked well for us in terms of days of the week. But also we do a mix of things. So we'll do, some of the very best sessions from our in-person events, some of the very best Workshop Wednesday sessions. Like some of those have been so good. We've wanted to put them on the podcast because if you guys haven't been to Workshop Wednesday yet, I know many of you have. It's super interactive. And so there's a lot of really good like community stories. And so we've started putting those on the podcast as well. And that's been performing really well, actually. So now it's a mix of, the very best sessions from in-person, some of the very best Workshop Wednesday speakers, original content and interviews. So there's like original content that Jason's putting out that's just on the podcast. And there's original content that Sam Blonde is putting out. So Sam Blonde, who's now at Founders Fund, is OG SaaStr, formerly at Brex, CRO there. Rick Bling, great criteria there. And he does our CRO confidential episodes of the podcast. And those are so crazy popular. Like, so it's been cool to see this evolution of the podcast. And that's kind of like where we are now with it on the roadmap. I think for like future looking purposes, right, we're trying to build out the CRO confidential even more. I think we've got guests slotted from now until London or maybe even further. So that one is gaining some traction as well. There's a lot of CROs asking us to get on Sam and SaaStr's podcast. So that one's been fun. And that's something we're looking at in the future of like, okay, do we segment more of it? But again, we're very mindful of the fact that like we did 3 podcasts and that was too many. So we're trying to find the right mix of like that quality of content for 2 podcasts. But anything I missed, Poya, on the podcast? I know you have your own podcast and Poya has his own podcast.
No, I think you've nailed it. The nice part is it's a megaphone, right? So whether it's you want to tie it with a product launch, you launched a new product, whatever it may be, it might be the best way to kind of get the name out.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so hopefully that color commentary is helpful. I'm going to stay on this slide and then probably skip a few others. Again, just looking at this from like a roadmap perspective, there's actually a few things we're doing new in the newsletter. So we have 3 different newsletters. The Insider is slightly newer than the other 2. So if you've been like a super fan or following SaaStr, you may know the weekly and the daily a little bit more. The weekly is literally the top content of the week, goes out every Sunday morning, performs amazing because it's the best content of the week and things that people want to read or things they might have missed during the week. The SaaStr Daily, that I almost want to rename it semi-daily, but it's 3 times a week at some of our most highly trafficked times. And it's the latest content from SaaStr. And then the SaaStr Insider is like some of our very best SaaStr content distributed in a newsletter on LinkedIn. So there's kind of like a 2-for-1 juice there of like it's being on LinkedIn and distributed there. And it's some of our best like evergreen content of all time. So those are the 3 newsletters. I'm going to chat briefly just on the weekly and then more so on the daily. So I think on the weekly, it's always, been our top performing content of the week. I think the biggest thing here on like the roadmap is like, we're always playing around with like, kind of like the design and like length and like how many articles is the right mix? What's the right mix? Another thing I'll say about the SaaStr Weekly is we do have this jobs section in it. And so for those of you who have open roles, let us know. We'll put them in the SaaStr Weekly. It'll go out to almost 100,000 people now. And it's for, if you're already a sponsor, you can do that for free. It's like included with whatever you're doing with SaaStr. So we've had a few sponsors already take us up on this. So if you have an open job listing, let us know. We'll put it into the SaaStr Weekly. Just email us. Email me ai@soundstream.com. Just email me your job posting. We'll put it in the weekly. So I think that's a cool section. Eventually we kind of want to grow and build that section out so that more people can do it and it's a little more formal, but that's kind of like what's on deck for the weekly. And then the daily, I know these are the sponsor ads specifically here on the screen, but one thing we're going to try on the daily that's on the roadmap is, so the daily goes out 3 times a week. And the audience for this is actually almost caught up to where the weekly is. The weekly is like at 100,000. The daily's hovering at like, I think 70 now because it's grown a lot in like the last year alone. And so one thing we're thinking of, not even thinking, we're actually experimenting with at the moment, is segmenting one of the SaaStr dailies. So there's 3 a week. And our audience, as you guys know, is a mix of like CEOs, revenue leaders, sales, marketing, investors. And so one of the things we're looking at doing and experimenting now with is segmenting like one, the middle daily send, so that there's a marketing version, there's a CEO version, there's a revenue leader, the CRO version, a founder's version, an investor's version. And I think that'll be interesting for our sponsors, because if you want to target something very specific to that audience, that could be super interesting to, chat with us on, of like, oh, I actually really want to hit VCs with something at the end of the year, or, oh, I really want to hit just CROs and your CRO segment of the daily with something I'm launching. Or if you have a sales tool, right? And like, you're like, I don't really need to get in front of marketers, I just want to get in front of the sales folks, or vice versa, or a MarTech tool. So I think that'll be fun. We're not ready to sell it yet, but we are experimenting with how it works. So if you want to be one of the early adopters of it, just let me or Poya know, and we'll let you know when it's ready to hit the market. But that is fresh off the press on the daily. Insider we chatted about. So let's chat about Europa, because I know it's coming up. It's in London. We're all super excited about it. Attendance has been crazy good. And so we want to talk about what's different at this year's SaaStr Europa, if you've been before, or if you're newer to sponsoring SaaStr Europa. We've chatted about this slide more so on the SaaStr Europa, like to SaaStr Europa sponsors. And you're like, Amelia, an audience screenshot is not new, but to add to the commentary here, we've seen a shift in who's coming. And so in that sense, it is a little bit new. And I'll share my commentary, and then we'll get Poya's thoughts here. SaaStr's always had a really good core audience of, VP level and director level and above. The decision makers are coming to this event. And let me tell you, from everything I've seen in tickets, especially in the last 2 weeks, of like people, as you get closer to the event, you get that natural like momentum pick up of speed and people signing up for the event, which we're at now for Europa. A lot of people are bringing their teams. A lot of people are bringing the buyers. So that's, CFO, CTO, CRO, whoever it might be. A lot of folks are bringing their teams, including their buyers now. And there's a lot of VCs coming to SaaStr Europa. There's obviously a lot of founders in sales and marketing, but I think those are really important indicators, especially if you're sponsoring, right? If you're on the phone or like, I'm sponsoring Europa, so good to think about these things of like how you're going to pitch at the booth, right? Like, or who you're going to staff at the booth, of like, there's going to be more buyers there. So you may want to send your senior leadership team, right? Like, I know it sounds odd to send your CRO or your VP to go do booth duty, but this might be the year to do it. Of all years to do it, this might be the time. So yeah, the demographics have definitely changed there. What do you want to add for folks, Poya, on that one?
Yeah, I see lots of sponsors, whether it's for Europa or annual. The nice part about SaaStr is we get a lot of established companies, right? So you can kind of rest assured, you're talking to folks that are going to be of value, but the attendees are of value as well, because this year we're trying to push more folks to bring their team. So one of the reasons, I think, Amelia, to echo what she said, is why we suggest having a diverse set of people working the booth. Their questions are going to be different, right? Sometimes you're going to talk to someone technical that's going to have a technical question. Sometimes you got to talk to someone that knows the product inside and out, right? So it's important to have a diverse set of team members work the booth.
Agreed.
So if you have any questions on how past sponsors have done that, it's there's not one size fits all. So just let us know. and we'll hook you up. So that's the beauty of this. But again, the beauty of SaaS, most teams are now distributed and remote. And for both of our events, we're seeing a nice uptick compared to last year, which means hopefully you're going to get in front of more buyers at more established companies.
Yep. Agreed. Okay, I don't want to spend too long on any given thing because I also want to make sure we have time for annual. Okay, SaaStr Europa. I know it's a little confusing sometimes when we say this. It's the fourth Europa, but the first time in London. So not the first Europa. It's just the first time it's actually been in London. And I will say it's there's no doubt that this has definitely helped our surge in attendance this year. For years, people were asking us to bring Europa to London. But we really wanted to be at the beach last year, so we went to Barcelona. And also, there's things like venue and timing and logistics, and so it did work out this year for us to finally take SaaStr Europa to London. We're very excited. You can see a natural boost in who's coming. We always have a global audience, but the UK and London specifically has always been number one at our events outside of the host country. So it's cool to see, a lot of folks showing up for this. So yeah, I think factor that into, right? If you're a current sponsor of Europa on this call, just factor that into your day. Like you may see different people from the companies throughout different days, right? Like day one, you might see one person, the next day you might see someone else. So to Poya's point, really good to have, your right staff and your right kind of teams there who can help answer questions. And maybe they're not in the booth all day. Maybe they're in, the SaaStr Cafe, or they're co-working or whatever it is, or meeting VCs. Like not everyone has to be in the booth and go to content to make the most of SaaStr Europa. There is a lot going on. So do staff accordingly. Keep that in mind for any SaaStr event. Not to be a broken record, we did talk about this yesterday on the workshop of getting the booth and showing up, or even just attending is only half. That's only half of it. Like there's a lot that goes into, planning your schedule, planning your meetings, doing the brain dates, meeting your customers, right? Getting your prospects there, like doing everything you can. And so if you don't freak out, if you haven't started yet, you've got 2 months to start now, right? Start now, get the plan in shape. And I almost guarantee you it will give you better ROI than, showing up and doing it last minute, as with anything in life. Really quick on our speakers and why this is important, honestly. And to give it more of a color commentary roadmap flavor, as is the theme for today. I know some of these speakers will look familiar to you, maybe some of them will not. And so every SaaStr event for speakers, we try and bring in what we call SaaS celebrities, like the big heavy hitters. Like I think everyone knows who Joe Thomas at Loom is. Like his headshot is like a crazy professional, and I think a lot of people use Loom here. I use Loom, like a lot of people use it. We use Bill, right? So I know. And Sterling just spoke at annual, but now he's coming to London. I think a lot of people know Parker. A lot of people know Sam from the podcast and Founders Fund, like a lot of familiar faces, but also some new ones, right? Some ones that are maybe more EMEA focused or London specific, or Bill Magnuson from Braves. We only had him digitally. And so this is the first time we're having him at an in-person event. Super fun. And so why this is important for our sponsors is the more of a draw the SaaStr speakers are, the more people come to the SaaStr event, right? So it is inherently good and better for you guys as sponsors when the speaker lineup is killer. And I will say right now, our lineup is so full. We're trying to still sneak in a few more headliners. And we're where do we put them on the schedule? But all that aside, I do think it is better for you because, more people will come to the show overall. There's a lot of different topics too that your team itself can learn from. We're doing more on PLG, EMEA. There's there's actually a few sessions on AI and all those implications. Obviously, there's a lot about profitability this year because that's just the whole theme of SaaS in 2023. But yeah, I think a lot to learn from there. A lot of great folks to interact with. And I know some of our sponsors too have customers that are maybe, speaking or, and maybe it's, maybe Zapier is a customer of yours, but Kieran is not your point of contact. I think it's always nice to go up and say hello, be like, hey, we love, XYZ person on your team. That's always nice for that person on the team when you're like, hey, oh, I work with Poya on your team and he's great. That always gets back to them, right? That's always good serendipity as well. So again, not going to get too much into this. The whole agenda is live on SaaStrLondon.com if you guys want to check it out, see it, game plan on it. But I do think it's super helpful and it shows in the attendance numbers. Anything I missed on speakers?
No, I just did that yesterday, right? If you have a customer or someone you want to go eye up, even if they're not your primary person, right? You can go tease them to get in front of the right contact. So always works.
Yep. Always works. Agreed. Okay. One thing that's new with SaaStr Europa, and I'll talk about this because it's important whether you're sponsoring SaaStr Europa or sponsoring SaaStr Annual later this year. You guys all probably hopefully no one loves brain dates. These are our main like one-on-one and group networking sessions that we do at SaaStr. So we had them last year at Europa, we had them last year at Annual. So high chance you either saw brain dates or took part in brain dates, or are planning to take part in it this year because it is such a great experience. One thing we're doing slightly differently with brain dates, there's actually two things. So how we do super brain dates is actually unique to SaaStr. Like there's no other, like I know other conferences do brain dates, you know, they're a great partner of ours. They're not exclusive to SaaStr, but how we do super brain dates is exclusive to SaaStr. And then one thing that's going to be new that we're piloting at Europa with the hopes of it going well to use at Annual is doing what we call a networking power hour on brain dates, where we literally there's no conflicting content in the schedule. Wow, amazing. Literally, like you're not going to compete with Jason Lemke and you're not going to compete with Parker. It's just going to be, there's a gap in the schedule. It's literally a power hour. And the power hour is to do as many one-on-one meetings as you can. And we're doing them via brain dates. They're going to be a lot of fun, probably a little chaotic, let's be honest, because it's, 4,000 people getting to tables at once. I don't think everyone will do it either. Some of our attendees are slightly, not as educated in brain dates yet, so they'll probably do it day two. I think I was like, we're only get more adoption day two than we do day one. But yeah, we're doing this cool new networking power hour. I hope those are not my famous last words. We're really excited about it because our goal has always been to do like, okay, how can we get everyone to have at least one good meeting? And that's where brain dates came in initially back in 2018. So it's been, 5 years of learnings now. And so this year we're like, okay, we've got the manpower, we've got the space at Tobacco Docs, which is more important, baby. Let's just line up all these tables and have people book one-on-one brain dates. Let's make a hole in the schedule for it so that it's focused. And I think what's great about this is like that gives your teams, if you're sponsoring, a chance to go and network without being like, okay, I know people are going to still be walking around, getting coffee, taking calls, whatever, walking by the booths, but you can safely send your team to go do that networking power hour and go book meetings. Like, I think that's magical. Like, okay, I can split my booth staff and like half of them can go day one, maybe the other half goes day two, but they can go book these meetings. It is not exclusive to just attendees. Sponsors can do it as well on your ticket type. So I think that'll be pretty nice because hopefully, if you have a lot of folks going, hopefully you book all the meetings for them and then you have this hour of just meetings after lunch. And I think, the quality of the meetings is always going to be varied, but I think if you do it mindfully, the point of brain dates is not to be a commercial. The point of a networking happy hour is not to be a commercial. I'm like, product for 10 minutes, like that's not going to go well. Like the point is to meet with somebody like-minded or somebody you've been wanting to meet that you want to connect with genuinely and just have a genuine conversation, for 10 minutes. If it leads to something in your product, listen, they will come back to your booth later, right? Like 10 minutes is not very long. Like it's really to get the conversation started and then finish that conversation later, but really just to get the meeting kind of set and like introduce yourself to someone. It's literally an introduction. So yeah, that's something we're trying at Europa. Again, hoping it goes well so that we can do it even bigger at SaaStr Annual, but hopefully that's exciting. And if you are, I know there's a few Europa sponsors on the call, we will share more about this as soon as it launches. It's not launched yet, so you haven't missed anything. You don't have to sign up for anything yet. It'll be in the next few weeks, just as we're trying to maximize the amount of folks who are in the platform first. Okay, the other thing I'll say about Europa, and then I'll touch quickly on Annual. B2BC, we've very similar to brain dates. We've done this a lot for the last, I don't know, since 2017. I don't know, maybe since the inception of SaaStr events. But we've always done some sort of version of Meet a VC. And if you guys are unfamiliar, this is where, we have attendees, sponsors, investors, VCs, portfolio, everyone like just come, and we actually do some matchmaking on the Meet a VC program between the investors and the founders or the CEO. One thing that's, again, we're piloting at Europa to then do for annual. We are actually going to pilot Meet a VC as a year-round program. I know because they've actually asked us for this. They're like, this is great, but like there's 20 people and like I'm going to meet 10 at the event and I want to meet the other 10 digitally or whatever or later. Like, and also like there's only 2 bites of the apple, right? Because there's June at Europa and there's September at SaaStr annual. And I know for folks, I know there's a lot of stats, and we just posted it on SaaStr.com too, of like deal flow slowing down, but the deal flow is still happening. And I do think there's a lot of conversations happening as well. You can see it in our attendance of SaaStr Europa. There's a lot of VCs coming. So I do think this will be an important program that we're, we're doing it at Europa, but we're also turning it into more of an evergreen year-round program. So that'll be interesting. So if that's something that is like, has piqued your interest, again, just let us know. There's nothing to do yet. It's launching in the next couple weeks. This is a roadmap meeting. It's launching in the next couple weeks because we were honestly gearing it up to launch it for Europa, and then we were like, oh, we should make this year round. So yeah, that's how that kind of happened there. And everyone was asking us for it. I was like, well, Europa's coming. They're like, cool, but also. All right. Our maybe, our no doubt biggest event. I want to say my favorite because I want to pick favorites on SaaStr events. But I would say the vibe at SaaStr annual. It's always the best. It's indoor outdoor for those who don't know. So I always like to use photos that show, either the sunset or the sunrise or open airs, just so that you get the sense that this is actually an indoor outdoor event. A lot of people compare it to music festivals, which I won't say because we're live streaming, but it's a SaaS festival, if you will. That's the best way to explain it. We are back to September. We are already on track for 12,000 attendees, so even bigger than last year. And let me just stop here, and then I'll share some things that are newer for this year. So SaaStr annual has always been our biggest event, and 2 of the things that we're trying at Europa are honestly because Europa is amazing, but it's clearly, even with 4,000 people, it's not at the size of annual. It's really beneficial for us to try things out like the networking power hour, like a more evergreen Meet a VC program, because then we can do it at scale at SaaStr annual. So it's nice that we kind of have a testing ground for it, because we tried different things, or vice versa. Like the cantina that we have at SaaStr annual is now going to SaaStr Europa. Like things go back and forth from our events. And like in that case, we're scaling the cantina, to a smaller size to fit in London and make it a pub. Like, anyways, we share product features if you will back and forth between our events. But I will say, so SaaStr annual, what's on the horizon? What's going to be newer for this year? All those good things I just mentioned at SaaStr Europa, assuming they go well and assuming we can do it even better, they will be at SaaStr annual, right? We will do this networking power hour. It'll be even bigger, even more impressive because of the amount of people who are coming to the annual. We're going to do more brain dates than ever before. We've got a few exciting things that I can't say on the live stream yet that we're trying to do, but all of it is, again, we do it at the lens of like, how is it beneficial to folks as attendees, to them as sponsors, to SaaStr as a whole, right? And so that's how we kind of came up with like, okay, the networking power hour, it's just a version of brain dates, but it's a version of brain dates where we consciously put a hole in the schedule, right, to benefit both the sponsors and attendees, because we usually have brain dates all day and people do them, but the feedback is always like, but I'm competing with, like, I'm picking, I'm like forced to pick of like, okay, do I go to this really great brain date because it's more one-on-one, or do I go to this because I want to ask the speaker a question or really want to learn about, this new thing. And so that's always been the feedback there. And so that's kind of how like that one sprung out of it. I will say, I know we had some of the feedback too from last year, like we had too many stages at SaaStr annual. There were 8. I was like, the most ever. We did it SaaStr annual. And so if you were a sponsor too, I know many of you were on the Sponsors We Love stage. You know, there were 3 of those stages actually. We're now just trying to do that as like one bigger one. So you're not like competing with like the other 2. Like, I do think listen, SaaStr annual last year was amazing. It was a 10, but there's a lot going on. And I do think sometimes it got a little bit overwhelming for folks. So in some cases, we are trying to simplify of like, okay, maybe the cantina just does one stage so that people don't feel so competitive between like, okay, there's literally 3 going on at once and I've got to go pick one. So that there's always gonna be competition for attention, but you know, slightly less competition for attention there. You know, we are looking at doing more things like better lounges, which, you know, the cantina is kind of like, or not, it's got like a stage, it has a lot of F&B. I like that area, but it is very busy. It's usually very busy throughout the day. There's always people in there. And so we're thinking now like ways to not only connect those people that are in the cantina, but also like how do we give people more places to still work, still be functional, right? Like more co-working spaces, if you will, more lounges, if you will, a bigger speakeasy. So if you guys don't know what our speakeasy is, we did this for the first time last year at SaaStr Annual, super fun. There's not one at Europa, so I'm sorry, don't look for one, because I know we were like, it's not hidden. So
It's similar. It's
I'm
a
like,
pub. We have the
it's a
pub.
pub. Yeah, it's a pub, but I'm like, it's not hidden in any way. Like, it's hidden in plain sight.
It's
But yeah,
same format. People will have
same
fun
format.
and drink.
Yeah, same format. But yeah, that's one of those sections where we're like, okay, we're gonna try different things, right? Like the speakeasy was an experiment last year. I was like, no one's gonna come find this place. And then I go in there, I'm like, oh, it's like a fun like lounge in here. I'm like, there's music, DJ Storm is hanging out in here. People are just having a drink and like taking selfies and like DJing. Like, I was like, oh, it's a little nice escape. So you know, things like that we're planning through now of giving, you know, you guys, especially as sponsors, more of those moments to connect with folks. Again, not always be in your booths the entire time. I know it's a lot. It's, you know, 3 days. There's a lot of content, networking, brain dates. And so I think in some ways we are trying to simplify the very best parts of annual so that there's not as much competition for your attention or how you split your teams, and hopefully it will help you maximize your guys' time at the events. And then Poya, I wanted you to share with the folks, not that it's really on the roadmap, but I know a lot of folks are using this now as like a team meetup. And one of the things that you can actually do this year is host your own meetup at the executive briefing center that we have. So maybe just talk for 5 minutes on that for folks
Yeah.
who are not familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So on a couple of occasions, if you're a platinum and above sponsor, those folks like to use the 40 acres of land we have to either meet their customers to do like a mini user conference, let's say it, or pipeline influence, right? Or the other method that's come up most recently is they actually like to use it to have their offsite while SaaStr is happening. So a couple of weeks ago, our wonderful team members at B talked about how they usually like to plan their offsite around SaaStr Annual. So if you have a remote distributed team, right, if you think about it, it's going to be really expensive to go somewhere. So why not use our resources in the land we have? But the other cool thing about B is they're actually going to take turns and showcasing and getting product feedback. And what they want is they want every single team member that's on the team to know what it feels like to interact with their customers, right? So we've talked a lot, I think, about like bringing your prospects and customer to SaaStr, but the other thing we're seeing is we're seeing some innovative companies move up their sponsorship tier to platinum because marginally, like the opportunity cost of doing an offsite, like it's going to be expensive. So why not, you know, hit multiple, hopefully objectives, team building, meeting customers, having your team learned from the customer's voice what the feedback is on your product, right? So if you're interested in doing that, we just did it for a couple of sponsors over the last 10 days. So it was an interesting learning. Let us know and we can talk about remaining availability and opportunities we have.
Yeah, and that goes for, I mean, I know it seems close, but that goes for London as well. Like if you're like, I really want to bring some of my CRO, customer CMOs, whatever it is, CIOs to London, like I've been racking my brain on how to do this. Just let us know. There is a whole article on it on SaaStr.com. I will link it in the chat about doing your own mini event within an event. But I do think, just to maybe end on this point, because I said it was going to be 20 minutes and now we're at 40. Maybe just to end on this point for SaaStr annual, and maybe to start thinking about it now if, doing it for London is a little bit overwhelming. Or I know sometimes, teams need to put a lot more into place to do something like this. So if you're one of those folks who have more approvals, definitely think about this for SaaStr annual. You could tell us tomorrow that you want to do this for annual, and it would not be too soon. But yeah, there's an article, I just listed it in the chat there. And I will say, to Poya's point, and the great story of B is a good one. It's a good example. But one thing we chatted about last week, if you guys missed it, was the cost of events and the trends in events. And for those who are maybe not doing your own customer events, or you've seen, as we've seen, that things are fairly high right now for anything across the board, right? Even just to book flights is expensive for your team, outside of booth costs, swag, So just think about that being maybe tenfold on hosting your own event, of like production costs, shipping, rental costs. It's all crazy. Everything's expensive right now. We've not been immune to it, right? So we've had to get creative in some ways on how to combat that. But yeah, all that to say, like, if you're there and your team has told you, like, we're not sure we can do our own events this year because it's just the numbers don't add up, and it's, I know everyone's trying to be profitable this year. This is a really great option to do it at SaaStr. A lot of your customers are probably already coming. And Mutiny, who did this last year with over 80 CMOs and marketing exec, I think, if I had to guess, I would say probably half of them were already coming to SaaStr. So this was a case of like it was easy for them to invite folks, because like half the time they'd be like, oh, this person's already coming. So they could just come to our mini customer event. And then they invited some folks who weren't already coming. But I think it's a good way to do it, because then you get that built-in inertia of like, to go fly to all these 80 customers at once, you pay a lot more than doing a mini event within SaaStr. So, to Poya's point, it is open to our platinum and up sponsors to start with, just because, based on where we think the demand is going to be, that will probably max us out for how many of these we can do. But it's a fair point of like, it's a great example of literally why B just upgraded from Super Gold to Platinum, was so that they could do something like this, and also do a team meetup at SaaStr annual. So let me end there. I don't know if we have any questions for folks. I know we threw a lot at you in 40 minutes. I'm sorry that I said it was going to be 20. But hopefully this has been helpful. It's been sort of a slightly different style of webinar than we've been doing lately, because it's more of like a roadmap, future facing. So if you guys have any feedback or things you want to see at a future SaaStr event, do let us know. We do actually incorporate a lot of sponsors had ideas on, or even attendee ideas on, or like, everyone telling us to go to London for 4 years, and then we did it. So it may not happen overnight, but usually, if we have the manpower to do it, we shall. What else, Poya, for on this Thursday, April 13th?
We appreciate you guys. And if you have any questions, whether it's about Europa or annual, let us know. I think the team, for the most part, slammed with Europa, so that's the focus. But even for annual, we're happy to assist and jump on calls. And as always, thanks for coming on these webinars. And if you have suggestions of what you want to see on these webinars, let us know. We try incorporating one sponsor/customer once a month. So you'll see somebody on that shortly. But outside of that, open to feedback on what else you guys want on these weekly sponsor webinars, because they're for you. But I think without further ado, again, thank you for being part of SaaStr and being one of the best parts of SaaStr. And until next time, be well, be safe, and catch you on a future webinar.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Amelia. Bye.
Thanks, man. Bye.